So to calculate this out, this drawer box is 8.5 inches. Add 6/16 and add half of this, or 5/16. 5 and 6 is 11/16. Plus 8/16 is 19/16, or carry 1, 9 and 3/16. So the drawer front here, we want to make 9 and 3/16. Similarly here, for this drawer front, it'll be 7.5 inches for the box, plus 5/16 plus 5/16. 10/16 plus 7.5 is 8 and 1/8. And then for this drawer box, we want to take half of the space in between, half of 5/8, which is 5/16. And then we want to take the full space up here at the top. So you can say 5/16 plus, that would be 12/16, plus 6.5 plus 6 and 8/16 will equal 6 and 25/16, or 7 and 9/16. Now, if we add up all of those drawer fronts, it should come to 24 and 7/8. So we've got 15 and 9 is 24. And we've got 3/16 plus 2/16, 5/16, plus 9 is 14/16, or 7/8. So that checks, and that means that those dimensions are correct. So we can figure out these dimensions over here exactly the same way, and I've already done that. So now all I got to do is measure the width of these two to get the lengths of the drawer fronts, and we're ready to start cutting out pieces. Okay, so I thought kind of a neat way to show you how I go about selecting the wood for the drawer fronts would be just to let you peek over my shoulder as I'm doing it. Now I've got all my drawer front dimensions written down here on a piece of paper, and I started going through some of this store-bought poplar just to see what I had and what we might be able to get drawer fronts out of. Now, obviously there's these annoying little adhesive stickers all over this. This has not been milled at all, but I've picked out pieces that are relatively flat and should work good for the drawer fronts. Now this is a piece that I had left over from another project. It's a scrap, but it's really nice and flat. I had it stored with some other lumber and had it deep in the stack, so it stayed flat. And what I've done is I've marked off the length, and the width of this is wide enough that even after I mill it, joint the edges and stuff, this will be just fine for drawer F. So I'll lay that aside. And then I found these two pieces of scrap, and I really liked the way the grain sort of flowed here. It actually looked pretty good. And this is wide enough when it's glued together to make drawer C. So I kind of made a mark down here. I'm just going to chop off the end. It'll be overly long, but I'm going to chop off the end. Then I'll joint this, glue these pieces together, and then mill it to final size for drawer C. Then I started looking at some of the longer pieces of wood, and as I flipped these around and turned them, I found this little segment here on this board and this segment on this board that just had a nice flow to the grain and looked good together. So I made a mark here and a mark here. It's about 1 inch longer than it needs to be, and I've labeled these. This will be drawer G. After I cut these out, I'll mill this, joint it, and glue them together, and that'll be the front for drawer G. Now before I start matching up other boards and mixing and matching to get things lined up, I'm going to go ahead and chop those out so it's easier to move these boards around. So I'll be back in just a minute and we'll keep going. I kind of like the way this little bit of circular shaped grain sort of matches this cloud shaped grain in here. Oh, now that has promise. Is this a bit obsessive for shop fixture? Perhaps. Oh, I like this. Okay, I like the way this grain goes with this grain here, so I think what we'll do is we'll chop a drawer out right along here, and I'd like this to sort of be in the center of the drawer. And we'll make this drawer B. And now all we've got left is drawer A. Don't really like that. But I have an idea. Okay, let's visualize now if we were to split this in half and turn this piece around where this meets up with this. That actually might look pretty good. So let's cut this in half. Okay, so I cut this board in half. Now let's swing this around and take a look. Oh yeah, that actually has some visual interest there. I kind of like that. All right, so there's all our drawer blanks. We've got to glue up, edge glue. So I'm going to joint these edges and then we'll glue them together. All right, now I've got the drawer front parts jointed and they're marked as to how I want them to be glued up. Now I'm going to do something I don't always do, but I'm going to do it because I'm kind of in a hurry and it helps in the alignment. I'm going to cut biscuit joints just so that the boards line up in the center better when I'm gluing them up. So all I did was take a square and mark a line across the joint in two places. And I want to cut these biscuit joints with the labeled face up. There. Now when I glue this up, I don't have to worry about clamping across this edge to keep this straight. The biscuits will keep it lined up. Okay, you guys have done this, I'm sure, 100 times. Just a couple of things. I'm just going to go through one glue up here. Got my clamps laid out, got some wax paper underneath, and I put a little strip of blue painter's tape on here just to keep any squeeze out from getting on the tracks of my clamp. Now I'm going to take the boards over here, stand them up on edge. I'll just pull the biscuits out temporarily. And I'm just going to put a very small amount of glue on. I don't really want to flood the surface. There's no reason to clean up all that glue, all that squeeze out. And I'm not going to glue the biscuits either, because it's not needed, just for alignment purposes only. I'm going to spread this glue out real thin on here. I'm going to get on either side of the biscuit opening, so we don't want any gaps to open up. Okay. Drop the biscuits back into place. and we'll tighten up the clamps. And there we go. Don't need death grip on here. Just need to hold it in tight registration so we don't get a seam line showing. Get the last of that glue off there. And that's 2 down. And I've got 3 more to glue up. Now that the drawer fronts are in the clamps and setting up, it's as good a time as any to start working on the design for the trim on this cabinet. Now, I'd like to face off this plywood edge, obviously, but I would like to do it with an over wide piece extending over the side, where I can put another piece over here on the back side and give it the apparent appearance of about 1.5 inches width on this style and looking like 1.5 inches width on the style on the other side of the corner. So to do that, keeping in mind that my plywood is about a 32nd inch shy of 3/4 inch, I wound up measuring this and found out that I need to make this piece 1 15/32. Obviously, if this was a full 3/4, my poplar that I'm using is 3/4, that'd be 1.5 inches. But because the plywood is a little bit narrower, we've got to make it just a little bit less than 1.5 inches. Now, because it's a little bit less than 1.5 inches, that same size piece is going to fit for the rail across the bottom where we doubled up the plywood. So, to maintain symmetry, I'll go ahead and use the same width piece here for the center style running down through here, and the top will be the only piece that I'll have to cut different, and that'll essentially be 3/4 inch less a 32nd to match the plywood. If I get it just a little bit too thick, I'll make sure that I'm flush on the underside and a little high on the top side, and then I can just take a plane and smooth it down. Keeping in mind we're going to have formica on the top, so we don't want any difference in the height to telegraph through the formica. So I've got a bunch of scraps, so the first thing that I want to do is rip as many pieces as I can out of the scraps that are long enough for these styles to get this particular width. Then I'll cut out of some fresh stock the longer piece to go across the bottom on all 4 sides. Then I'll come back and rip these smaller pieces, and we'll be ready to start gluing the face trim onto this box. Okay, I've got my trim pieces cut to size now, and I've mocked up the first glue up, and I want to glue this style in place. Now let me just show you what I did to mock this up. First of all, I want the top of the style to be absolutely flush with the top of the cabinet. So I bolted on a block here that I will push the style up against, and that'll make sure I get it flush at the top. I also want it to be flush with the inside edge of the cabinet. So I've put a block here with a large clamp that I can get through, and that will give me registration to the inside of the cabinet in the center. And now I'll adjust the other pieces as I go along, the other ends, in case there's a little curve to this piece of wood. So basically what I'll do is I'll apply glue to this edge. I'll put this piece up here, push it up flush to the top, push it flush to this block, and put this tiny little clamp on there just to hold it in place. And then I'll put some cabinet clamps on to actually clamp the style onto the edge of the plywood until the glue sets. So let's go through that process and we'll get this glued up. Well, we live and learn. While adding the front piece and gluing that onto the cabinet and then coming back and adding the wraparound corner piece worked just fine, I realized that it would be significantly easier to glue these up as sub-assemblies ahead of time, where all I had to do was to put this up to the corner and glue it in place. So that's what I'm doing now. I got one more to make up here, and it just takes a minute to make these up. Just put a little dab of glue on it. Clamp it for a few minutes. And you're good to go. The only thing you want to do, because I have these cut to exact length and size, the only thing you want to do is make sure you get the ends absolutely flush. And there we go. Okay, so on this corner of the cabinet I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm going to use my prefabricated corner piece. And I think this is going to make it a lot easier, because all I got to do is just put some glue on the inside of this piece and it'll be self-aligning since it's going to line up with the corner of the cabinet. So let's do the same thing, and we'll put a block up here so that the top is in registration with the top of the cabinet. And then all we got to do is put some glue on this, whoops, this way, and clamp it into place, and we're good to go. Well, the trim is almost finished. Got the trim here on what I'm calling the front of the cabinet. Got the vertical pieces here on either end, the rails running across the top and bottom, and this middle vertical piece which hides the juncture between this solid part of the cabinet and this open part of the cabinet. Then here on this end, we have this framed in and ready to make drawer fronts for this. And on the back, I went ahead and replicated what was on the front. This is actually a solid piece of plywood, but I did this just so it would kind of look like the front side. It's really not necessary. This is the only piece left to do. The bottom is done, and we just need to put this piece in here, and we'll be all set to go and ready to do the drawer fronts. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.